merged, and the idea that information is more or less valuable depending on what you know of the person who's profiting that information has become very current. So the idea that there are these areas out there that are like so unrelated to search, are so unrelated to information, is one that you really have to take with a grain of salt. And we've expanded into a lot of areas where we think information is an important part of what it means to be in that area. And you can look at some of the projects that we've done. You can make a parlor game of guessing exactly why we think that something is related to information. So we have, what was one of the first things we did was Google Images, image search. It's pretty easy to understand how that relates to information. You remember that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and you know it's we can fit like 100 pictures on a page. So boom, that's a lot of information we're giving you right in one image search result. We've expanded into shopping, giving shopping-specific results. Also very obvious, you're looking for information about shopping, about products that you want to buy. There's no better time to be trying to get information on the web. We've also expanded into things like mobile phones. We have our own operating system for mobile phones that's kind of, there are smartphones that are in the same space as the iPhone. You know, what do smartphones have to do with trying to get information? Actually, what do smartphones have to do with trying to get information? Well, the answer is that you're going to search on your smartphone in how many years? Some of you, it's already right now.
Right.
Some of you, it's going to be 5 or 10 years from now. But mark my words, in 10 years, almost all the searches that you do are going to be from a phone. Or from a phone-like device that hasn't been invented yet. Because already phones have stopped being something that's associated with a place. You have a phone in your house, you have a phone at work, to something that's associated with the person. You carry your phone around with you. And they've become basically, you know, what used to be called PDAs, personal, you know, digital devices, and they're there when you need them, and they are the most handy thing when you're trying to do something, anything in the world. Basically, you pull out your phone to do it. And as we're trying to revisit the etiquette of when it's appropriate to pull out your phone at the dinner table, you're seeing that come into play, where people are wanting to answer questions, they're wanting to do research right away from their phones. Now, you can do a lot of things from your phone. You can play Farmville, you can draw pictures. But one of the things you do most with the phone, just like one of the things you do most with your desktop computer, is search. You try to find things. You try to answer questions. You try to fill some information need that you have. And you know, there's no guarantee that the phones that are developing are going to be useful for that. They're going to be effective at that. Phones are different devices than computers. They're easier to use in some ways, they're harder to use in some ways. You have to think about how to design them in a way that's effective as a means of getting information, as a means for answering your questions. And there's no guarantee that was going to happen. The cell phone kind of designs of the time were still, when the market was very new, they were still thinking about these kinds of questions, and who knows what priorities they would have, what answers they would come up with. We got into the business to come up with an operating system where being able to get information, being able to find everything, was part of like kind of the DNA of the operating system. It was built from the ground up to support that. And you know, how successful will these Android phones turn out to be in the long run? You know, who knows? They've been doing quite well so far. But I think that their real success has been getting people to think about this issue of finding information as an essential part of what it means to build a phone in, you know, this upcoming decade. So, you know, sometimes the answer that you get for why we're doing a certain thing involves looking ahead. It involves looking ahead quite a bit. Another effort that's kind of related to this cell phone effort is we're writing a new operating system for computers, for laptops, or these new netbook computers that are coming out, called Chrome OS. Has anyone heard of this? Not quite as popular as the Android phones, but of course it hasn't come out yet, so you know it's still vaporware to an extent. But we're also trying to rethink the way that you use, portable computers, which are like phones, but have a different way in which they're easy to use and in which they're hard to use. They are certainly more portable than computers are today. Computers are getting more and more portable, even the ones that still have keyboards on them. And the way that you think about using those is also different. It's different perhaps from the way you use phones or the way you use computers. And again, we want to make sure that there's an easy way to use it where you can satisfy the information needs you have. Now, what is the biggest challenge for laptops as opposed to phones? One problem is that laptops, you don't keep on all the time. Their battery life isn't so great. They have much bigger screens. They use the battery much quicker. So maybe you turn off your laptop. You only turn it on when you need it or when you're doing work. If it takes you a minute and a half to boot up your laptop like it does for many of you today, you're not going to be using it to answer, questions that you've got about, some bar argument about, when the Phillies last won the pennant. You're going to keep arguing for a lot longer than a minute and a half, too. But if you could boot the computer in 3 seconds, that's a different story. And so the kinds of issues that you think about when you're thinking about how do you serve information, how do you make information not only accessible, how do you make it useful? It covers a pretty wide area. So here we are, a search engine company. You'd think that everyone we hire is working on search algorithms and ranking and artificial intelligence and this and that. But we have people focused on hardware and thinking about how to boot your computers faster. So you look at all these issues, and maybe it's not so hard to see why 11 years after I joined the company, I'm still, really intrigued by some of the stuff we're doing and really impressed by the possibilities. So I'll talk for just a few minutes about, the future, how all this stuff might play out, and then I'll open it up for questions. So I've already talked about some of the near future stuff, about you're searching from phones, and the search experience is going to be a lot different. Let's think about that a bit more. How else are phones different? I mentioned they don't have a keyboard. So the natural way to search on a phone, perhaps, is to talk. So Google's been spending a lot of effort thinking about translation technology. Not just translating things from one language to another, but translating from the spoken word into the written word. And the problems are actually very similar, especially when you take accents into account. And we have services now. If you have an Android phone, there's actually a way where you can ask search queries in it right now by talking as opposed to typing, and then it tries to understand what you say and give you good search results based on that. That's a continuing focus of ours. A goal eventually will be you can talk in any language, and then it will translate the search into the appropriate language to give the best results and give you the answers. Or maybe you just use the phone to just do straight translation, like Star Trek. You use it as a, what do they call, tricorder. And that's the kind of information you would never have today with search on a computer getting a list of web results. But it's certainly an information you need. You're in some foreign country and someone's saying something you don't understand, you don't speak the language, you just say, hey, talk into this. And then the words pop up in English on the phone, and you can have something resembling a conversation. Certainly enough to get the information that you need from the person you're talking to. So I think that the ways that information gathering, the ways that question answering is going to play out in the phone era is really exciting. We haven't really thought very much about all the possibilities yet, but I assure you over time we're going to see them come out. We're going to see interesting things like this, where translation becomes an information need that makes sense to have. Another thing I talked about briefly is social. This idea that you can search for, search amongst your universe of friends or people you know. So you can, when you're asking about good restaurants, maybe it's only restaurants your friends like, or maybe it's only restaurants of people that you've marked down as having similar food taste to yours like. And it limits the search in some way. The idea is that the web is getting bigger, it's certainly not getting any smaller. And maybe it's becoming harder to make sense of it, or maybe you're finding that in some places, the web's collected wisdom doesn't really match the kind of wisdom that you're looking for. And how can you narrow that down? How can you think about factors that affect the kind of information you get? The idea being that for information to be useful for you, it's not only has to be good information, but you have to trust its source. And in the past, you've thought about trusting your source as just, is the source credible or not? You know, are they trying to spam you, or are they trying to trick you, or, you know, are they legitimately sharing, you know, their opinions and their thoughts or their knowledge? But, you know, in the future, I think you're going to get much finer gradations of trust. You know, is it someone who you've used their advice before and it's turned out well for you? You know, is it someone whose tastes are similar to yours? You know, who knows exactly what kinds of things will turn out to be useful for people. But I think we're going to find that as research develops, as people start thinking more about how they want to get information, those kinds of issues about the source of the information is going to become more important, or more interesting to think about. And it's not something that you use all the time, any more than image search is something that you use all the time. But it's a tool that would be useful to have in order to think about getting the best information for you. Another kinds of way that search is going to become important, and again, this is playing off existing trends, is the location information is going to become a factor in the searches that you do. And part of it is obvious. If you're searching for a restaurant, maybe you want a restaurant that's nearby. You don't want to know about the great restaurants you have to travel to Southeast Asia in order to eat at. But already people have become accustomed to thinking of maps as information. And certainly when we first came out with our map service, there was some doubt as to how that related to our core business. But finding addresses, finding directions, that's a useful kind of information as well. And now, with search moving to your phone, not only does it mean it's always available, it means it's always where you are. And now you can start to do all sorts of interesting things, thinking about, you know, what is useful to me at this time, given where I am. The most obvious thing, if you have an Android phone, I encourage you to try this, that has built-in driving directions. Just like the GPS as you put in your car, but it's built into your phone. And it always has up-to-date maps, and it's free. And so, you know, it's very easy to say, take me from where I am right now to, you know, where I'm trying to go, and it'll just read out the driving directions to you. But you can use it in much more interesting ways. You can be like, show me, you know, all my friends who are nearby. And there are certainly companies that do that now, if you're willing to share that kind of information. Or, you know, show me restaurants nearby that are similar to restaurants that I've liked in the past, that you know about because I've told you, but that I've never been to before. And, you know, that's the kind of search that you can do right now, but it's kind of painful because it's too broad a query. There's like the universe of restaurants you might like that you've never been to before is huge. But if the search engine knows where you are and can do that kind of limiting for you, then it becomes a much more tractable problem. And maybe it has a different idea of distance than just physical distance. You know, it knows if you have a car, and you tell it that you have a car, and then, you know, something that's easy to drive to. You know, maybe if it's right off the interstate, it can be further away and still be considered close. Or, you know, you're in some place where you have to take the subway to get there. You're in New York. You know, places near the subway are close, and places that are not near the subway are considered far away. These are all things that you can do, but it's kind of complicated. It's really nice that the computer can do it for you. And so there's all this information awareness that it can add. It can go into the mix and start to give you more interesting results.